if I don't have a team, where do I get a team?
I was testing this theory at the student competition. That's why we interviewed so many of the students and kind of got their feedback on using Edify, the competition, how what they learned, like from a real world standpoint. I think right now what the industry is doing is more or less just trading estimators.
Why do you think we have a labor shortage in the office? You talked about we're just swapping estimators, and I'm curious where we find new ones. Why isn't there a line at the door or a stack of applicants at these companies? Are the GCs too picky? Do they have unrealistic job requirements?
Sometimes like change management's hard and sometimes human behavior is hard. It's just difficult. I think that's a piece of it. It's like some of this gets into like psychology and just the human element. So I think that is a piece of it, but I don't think they're being picky for the sake of being picky.
Oh, that's proper Precon. Bring the right people in.
Welcome back to Proper Precon. I'm Troy Simon. With me, as always, is my partner in crime, the man we call the Professor Trey Darnell. Welcome back, Trey.
Hey, good to be back.
Yeah, man. Well, we're doing it. I mean, hey, 2 episodes. It's good to talk to you, like whether it's a podcast or not, man. So this is just a daily thing for us anyways. But now that we're recording it, at least I guess we're on the record, right? So we have to
Right.
we got some good stuff out of episode 1, some good traction. I think maybe some good feedback, some good lessons learned out of it. A couple of things that really resonated for me were when we were talking about how sometimes the pre-con cycle can take, even years, or that idea of starting over like a new iteration on every a new estimate for every pricing, iteration these guys go through. And one thing that maybe kept coming back to me that might be related to that is there's an estimator shortage. We mentioned it a little bit in the first episode, but I think we barely scratched the surface. So I wanted to go a little deeper on that today. But what I've been looking forward to for 2 days now, maybe 3, is a segment that you created called the Precon Punchline. So why don't you go ahead and just
Yeah.
start us off with something funny, man? Tell us a joke.
Yeah. I didn't know if I was gonna go with like dad jokes, dry humor, any of that stuff, but this is just more of a one or two liner. It's just the dangerous thing about early numbers is not that they are rough, it's that they are remembered.
Well, before we get into the meat of today's show, I thought about this week, maybe we should do, sort of a quick rundown on a couple news events that caught my eye. I'll tee a couple of these up for you, and you can give us maybe a couple quick takes, right? Nemechek Group just acquired HCSS for $2.4 billion, and what some say is a major move to expand into heavy civil for them. And at $2.4 billion, I got to think that's a big move. We got Trimble. They acquired recently Document Crunch to bring contract analysis and risk management into their Construction One platform. You got Autodesk that finalized a deal with Rumbix. I didn't even know that was happening. So to me, these acquisitions seem to just keep signaling yet another clear signal that construction tech is maybe consolidating a bit around platforms with these big groups buying these. And it seems to me that people want to maybe connect estimating and field operations and their data to power these more integrated workflows. Do you think that the teams are buying platforms with a clear workflow in mind, or are they still trying to stitch together processes after the fact?
I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, even on the last week when we spoke, right, talked about how we have that spectrum of, point solutions all the way to platforms and everything in between. But I think every industry in some regard goes through this unbundling and bundling, and it's cyclical. And so I think what we're seeing is, point solutions ultimately they exist and they become bundled into something. So I think we're seeing kind of a bundling exercise happen with the goal of trying to stitch better workflows together. The challenge when these big, like large companies acquire small companies is, do they keep the brand, which is really the magic of their tool? Do they kind of bring it under their umbrella? I myself went through an acquisition from PlaneGrid to Autodesk.
Same.
Initially they kept it for a year, right? And then it was a PlaneGrid and Autodesk company. And then PlaneGrid, they kind of stitched that into like with ACC build, it became Autodesk Construction Cloud, all those things, right? So I just think that these like larger companies are kind of seeing some additional market share. CSS is really a heavy civil tool at the end of the day. Nemechek also owns Bluebeam, which is really for takeoff and plan review and things like that. So I just think that they're kind of expanding their footprint across other verticals in the market. But I don't know if that it seems like even you have conversations, we talk to so many GCs, right? Like regardless of the acquisitions, so many of the conversations still revolve around like what the workflow is. So if they can stitch together a better workflow, cool. The question is really what are they trying to accomplish by acquiring these companies? And are they focused on, like, at Ediphi, we're focused on pre-construction. Are they focused on certain segments of the industry? Or are they trying to like do everything at once?
Yeah. I was wondering that too. I mean, I said same when you mentioned PlanGrid to Autodesk. Mine was ProEst to Autodesk.
Yep.
Um, but that wasn't even the first one I've been through in that manner. But you do wonder what their plan is with acquiring these companies. Is it just a customer based play? Because I've seen it where they acquire these tools and sometimes they just shelve them and they move on. And I'm sure they're using some of the IP for, enhancing their current product or maybe things of that nature. But you wonder long term, like, is Document Crunch going to continue to live, or was it just a customer based play? Same with HCSS, same with uh was the Rumbix play. But and maybe for some, if they're keeping like Nemechek, I don't know what their plan is to build a platform play, right? You look at a company like Autodesk, Procore, Trimble, theirs could be more platform play where they're trying to grab some of that IP and funnel it into the main system. Nemechek, maybe they're just acquiring solutions to keep several point solutions around. I'm not sure what the integration, if
Yeah.
any, is around those, but I do wonder that same thing, what the ultimate goal is from that. But
Yeah.
um, topic two, construction outlook. I was reading this and it's getting a little shaky from what I can see. Data centers are doing well, but at least Construction Dive, Reuters, Wall Street Journal, some of the other ones reporting that private non-residential spending actually declined 4 months straight now. Data centers are surging. Year-to-date spending's hitting like all-time highs. I think it's $37 billion in backlog. I read that they had, growth up around 20 some odd percent, 23, 24%, all tied to this AI, hyperscale demand, if you will. Even that segment's not bulletproof. I mean, with nearly half of the data centers out there, you hear about all these delays, right? They plan
Right.
these things, and whether it's the municipality or the state, they're facing all these, delays or just flat out cancellations, whether it be water, power, environmental, you name it. Uh, which really, to me, exposes how dependent the industry maybe becomes on one area, to carry it, the market growth. Um, with market growth, is this uneven? How should teams be thinking about where to spend their time and effort when they're pursuing work?
You know, it seems to me that what the economy's good or the economy's bad. It's usually it's like and there's some gray space in between, but like and not to get political, but like when the economy's not good, usually who ends up spending the money is the government, right? And a lot of public work kind of takes off. And but when it's a good economy, you see more private developers and things like that, and you see some of these niche market sectors come in play. So I like you know, at, lots of GCs, like some GCs have a very diverse portfolio and some don't, and they focus on very specific things. And so all of a sudden, if the economy's not great, and your portfolio is highly private developers and just private work, then it makes sense to kind of diverge a little bit and do something different. Just keep feeding the machine. Now, the difference in these jobs, these markets operate differently, right? Like
Yeah.
typically public work is, it's bid on some kind of grading matrix, and you have to learn how to work those matrices and meet the different organizations. In Tennessee, we've got Tennessee Board of Regents, for example, TDOT, all these different places, right? So um, I just think that you hedge your bets just by diversifying your portfolio a little bit, getting good enough at some of these different market types, so that when the economy goes one way or the other, or if you see an industry shift, you're prepared for that. You may not have the full resume to like go build 1,000 data centers, but you've got a resume that you've built some data centers, for
Yeah,
example.
yeah. I think some companies would probably like to build just one, but
Absolutely. Yeah.
all right. And last one I have here was material cost. And I don't think this is anything new. I think it was probably worse if we think back to even COVID, but they're starting to move again, it seems like, in a pretty big way. Construction input rose at 12% on the annualized rate. from the start of the year, a year ago. And some materials like you think about like PVC, cement, they're jumping 25, 50%. I mean, I've even seen that just doing my own remodel on my house. And a lot of that is being driven currently by obviously the fuel and supply chain pressure that we're seeing. It's creating some volatility where, costs are changing faster than bids can keep up, which is making it a lot harder for contractors, I would think anyways, to price work and manage that risk. So my question is, you've had experience in this. When costs get volatile like this, how should pre-con teams be thinking differently about pricing, risk, decision making before a job even starts?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at like wood studs versus metal studs, for example, if I'm doing wood stud framing and a multi-family, multi mixed use, whatever, or if no metal studs, you start looking at what your options are and what your costs are for those different materials. Metal stud is higher quality. It's malleable. Wood studs, like you get all kinds of. I mean, you're doing some work at your house, like you've picked through the lumber pile at Lowe's and Home Depot. You know what that looks like.
Yeah.
Um, so I think you start looking at alternate materials to see where you can kind of shave some cost but still keep the quality. Tariffs are a piece of this too, right? Where we're getting our material from, import taxes, all that stuff that do make it hard to keep the cost in check. Uh,
Hmm.
but also this goes back to like, I mean, we've talked to this about this plenty, even off the record around like pre-con and like why it's so important to do pre-con faster is because this doesn't build a solid case to make pre-con take longer. In fact, we need to compress the timeline so we can actually keep the material costs in check. I've
Yeah.
seen some trade partners where they'll order the material ahead of time, they'll store in a warehouse just so they have it and they can keep their price at what it is. Every subcontractor can't do that though. And sometimes even how people charge, like you can't charge for some material on public jobs until it's on the job site.
Hmm.
So it like you buy it all up front, trade partners cash flow it, the GC, like they build the GC, but even how they can, the mechanism for how they actually charge the job and what they're able to charge for depends on what the rules are by the client, by the building owner. So yeah, I think there's a lot of challenges. There's always been challenges in labor and material going up. Um, we're seeing some more acute examples now because of import taxes, tariffs, and just resources in general. They're finite resources until you
Yeah.
get more of them, right? And so again, that's why all the onus I think should be focused on how do we shorten the pre-con cycle, and try and get that down to maybe a few milestones and maybe 6 months or less. Because when I was pricing steel in the midst of COVID, which let's just call it what it was during COVID, everyone should be throwing their prices out the window because they don't mean anything now. But I
Yeah.
couldn't keep the steel price for longer than a week.
It was
But
a
the
free.
job wasn't going to start for like 8 to 10 months.
Yeah. Aside COVID aside, just thought about this. Are those conversations a bit awkward to have with the owner if you've got a long pre-con cycle, or are they used to this kind of thing where we started out, at our concept and we sort of got a rough number. And then as we started, going through the different design phases and, you know, iterating on these changes with material. I mean, are those awkward conversations? Are they looking at this and going, well, why is this now, 5% higher or things of that nature?
I don't know if they're awkward conversations. I think there's some expectation that they have a budget and generally you come in over budget and then you have to figure out how you bring it back, like work towards the target value. I think the awkwardness in it or the hard part is what's not defined and early, especially early on, right? So you've made some qualifications, you've assumed some things, you've tried to communicate as best as you can what those costs are, where your holds and allowances might be, based off of what you know. But because there's like just lack of some definition, that's what creates the awkwardness.
Mhm.
Um, but it's not awkward until you go for like the first milestone is what it is. Then you get to
Right.
the second one, you have to explain that cost story. Like pre-con is an art, right?
Mhm.
Like it is science, but it's math with meaning. Back in school, the teachers say like, well, I can't grade that. You need to show me your work, right? Well, that's just a formula to get to an answer. The complexity of construction is, and pre-con especially, is that formula means something individual to everyone who puts it together and doesn't always carry the context. So
Makes
that's
sense.
kind of where some of the awkwardness comes into play around like how we communicate it, where we're not aligned. But we don't know we're not aligned till we talk about it.
Absolutely. All right. What I want to move into now is I'm calling it the big build spotlight. This is, hopefully once a week we're seeing this, and unless the construction market is really starts to fall off a cliff. But I want to look at like a major project award once a week and just maybe talk about it, how it relates to pre-construction. This week, I believe this was in Construction Die, where we're looking at a major student housing project out in California. Suffolk Construction, who we're obviously very familiar with, they were selected as a CM for this new student development. It was at California Polytech. It's a multi-phase project. It's going to deliver, I want to say, about 4,200 beds, along with the usual dining amenities, things, support space, things like that. It's got a public-private partnership, so maybe you could talk a bit about that, which I assume adds another maybe layer of complexity to this, especially maybe around cost control. With a job like this, large scale student housing, probably got to have a pretty robust pre construction team working on this, I would assume. Talk to me about the size of what we're probably looking at. Is it one estimator, 3 to 5 estimators, maybe a pre-con manager, VDC lead? Would something like this maybe look like? I think that might be good for, and we're going to talk about this a little later, the folks that may be watching this that are in education, maybe they're students and they want to learn a little bit more about what this might look like on these large projects and who all's involved. And I would also maybe assume a project that size can't be a quick turnaround, or could it? You're pricing across like multiple phases. You got these different design milestones, SD, DD, CD. I mean, something with this size, is it a 12-month, 24-month, 36-month project in pre-construction? Walk me through those complexities on something like this. Was it like phasing, occupancy planning, making sure you're hitting cost targets, whatever? Just talk a few minutes on that. Put your pre-con hat on, and what's a project like this look like? Head count wise, timeline wise, complexity, all that stuff.
Yeah, well, you picked one that's pretty intense because it's a PPP. So uh, I- there's there's different funding sources for it in that case as well. And I've actually not worked on a public-private. I've worked on public, and I've worked on public actually with multiple funding sources, whether it's like state funding and federal funding. Like state agencies, if they have to get both of those, they do lettings, and then those lettings, like as long as it's funded, that's when it goes to contract, right?
Yeah.
Um, so, but I would imagine on a project that size, for in that magnitude, you're gonna have like, I don't know, probably 8 to 10, 15 people handling the estimating. And some of these GCs probably have folks like specific to doing public work versus doing private work. It just takes a different mindset sometimes. And so they may even have special personalities inside their organization to kind of manage expectations, or like with those different project stakeholders, right?
That's got to be
Uh,
incredibly expensive, because you're going after a project like this. You don't even know you're going to get it, I would assume, right? At first.
right.
I got 15 headcount working on this with, the salaries aren't nothing for months, uh, maybe a year, maybe more. That's a big investment.
Yeah, generally, I've never worked on a public job where it was not free con. It's always been you just like put your best people on it, go after it, go through the matrix, but then you inject this private component into it as well, which there's probably a totally different grading scheme for that, and it's partly around resume, right? Like, what's your resume look like for the type of work that we want? Um, who's your staff on the job? What other projects have they worked on? Have they worked with so and so? You kind of, it's like a response to an RFP, and doing an interview at the end of the day, but you're mixing the bag a little bit because you have both the public and the private side, which is actually fascinating to me. And like I said, I've never been on one like that. I've only been
Mm.
on directly public or private. Um, but yeah, I'm sure it's a large estimating team, a pretty big concerted effort, and um, yeah, probably a decent amount of time. 1, 2 years, I would think up to 2 years doing the pre-con just for that. Because you also have to think how fast do the designs come out?
Mhm.
And does the information come out? Because designers and engineers are doing the same thing times every client who wants pick a project.
Here's what I think it can get interesting, and it's sort of a lead in to our overall theme today. We're talking about these projects. You see them come through the wire all the time, whether it's a stadium or some kind of public job like this that are,
Yeah.
billion or multi-billion dollar projects. But behind the scenes, and you just alluded to it there, you need a full pre-con team just to get a number that you can trust or at least feel good about as you're
Yep.
going into this project. It's a hefty investment up front. And if you're off, potentially cost you a lot more, on the back end. So my question is, where are all those people coming from? I mean, we're talking about, a labor shortage in the market today, not just in the field, but in the office. If I don't have a team, where do I get a team? I mean, if you were leading you know, a pre-con organization at a large GC, how are you going to recruit? Where are you going to recruit? And what would you be looking for?
Yeah, I mean that I was testing this theory at the student competition. That's why we interviewed so many of the students and kind of got their feedback on using Edify, the competition, how what they learned, like from a real world standpoint. Um, I think right now what the industry is doing is more or less just trading estimators. I like there's only so many folks who have learned the craft across the industry. Um, and have enough experience or tenured enough to actually work on that type of project that you just mentioned. You could bring in a more junior estimator to do some of the work, but it would also require some mentoring on that job, and a pretty steep learning curve, especially on a PPP if that's not been done before. I mean, there's all kinds of permits and things that like it just depends on the job type and where it's being funded from. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think the industry is just like what I've seen, and again, what we're hearing is there's not enough estimators. What I'm seeing is pretty much companies are just swapping estimators or trading estimators, and then we just have this shortage because there's more work coming out every day.
Yeah, yeah. So I guess that my follow up on that is thinking like if we talk about the pre-con labor shortage, it's not something that's caught us by surprise. It seems like I've been in this business 20 years. We've been talking about a labor shortage for the last 30 years. So
Yeah.
they,
Oh
they
yeah.
were talking about it when I got here, and they'll
Yeah.
be talking about it probably when I'm gone.
Yeah.
Albeit most of the time it's been for a long time, it's been, we've been running up against a skilled labor shortage, right? Which part of me understands that. Especially, coming up in the generation that we're in, construction's hot, it's dirty. A lot of people may not want to get their hands dirty. They may not want to sweat all day. Pick a
Yeah.
reason why they don't go into, a trade or whatnot.
Mhm.
But why do you think we have a labor shortage in the office? You talked about we're just swapping estimators, and I'm curious where we find new ones, right? But good estimators, they get paid well, right? From in my experience.
Yep.
Um, why isn't there a line at the door or a stack of applicants at these companies? Are the GCs too picky? Number one, do they have unrealistic job requirements? Like you don't need a college degree to swing a hammer. You can go be a plumber and 3 years, own your own business and
Yep.
make really good money. But is it the fact that I got to go through 4 years of college, at a quality school with an engineering degree to get into pre-construction? I mean, what gives? What's the issue here? Why can't we get more people excited about doing this?
Yeah, first I don't think like I think we can define more of these pathways in college, like at university, even 4-year schools that kind of evolve around what the industry is looking for and like the modern workflows today around pre-con versus I mentioned this pendulum again, right? Integrated solutions, which means you have solutions geared towards pre-con, geared towards operations, geared towards accounting, right? I
Mhm.
think that we can create pathways in universities to help feed the industry. I don't think GCs are being picky, but some of these GCs that like say they do institutional or in K through 12, like certain project types, not that they have to hire an estimator that has that experience, but it certainly helps, right? Because then they know how to do it. And sometimes even estimators who have been doing it for 30 or 40 years, they kind of just estimate the way they estimate. And so if they're trying to find someone to estimate that GC's way, it could be like they want the experience, but they also want a balance of that and to be able to like kind of plug them in like a plug and play. And sometimes like change management's hard and sometimes human behavior is hard. Like it's just difficult. I think that's a piece of it. It's like some of this gets into like psychology and just the human element. So I think that is a piece of it, but I don't think they're being picky for the sake of being picky. I think that they're trying to find the right fit. It's like the right fit for the role, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm just curious, why not? I realize it might be hard to find a seasoned estimator with K through 12 experience if I'm
Yeah.
looking for specifically for that market.
Yep.
Why am I not just hiring more juniors, guys with,
Yeah.
maybe they want to, maybe they're 40 years old and they've worked in the field and they're tired of digging or they're tired of riding a machine and they want to maybe come into the office, or maybe
Yeah.
they're someone that, you know, didn't get a degree in construction engineering or a construction pathway.
Yeah.
Maybe they're curious about construction. They've got a decent, mind and could pick things up. Why not bring in a junior estimator and train them internally? Think of like the minor leagues in baseball. It's
Mhm.
hundreds, thousands of people in the minors. They never really make it to the pros. There's going to be a select few that are going to be the top tier estimators, but
Yeah.
why not have a deeper, I don't want to call it cheaper bench. Let's call it cheap, inexpensive, a deeper, inexpensive bench if I'm a
Yeah.
GC. Why would that not work?
Well, I think on some level, even junior estimators are being traded, which doesn't really help with the like. You're still trying. I think we're kind of focused on like how do you bring more talent in, and even folks in pre-con who estimate who do pre-con and estimating today, they may not that may not be where they started. I was talking to a guy yesterday at an open house, and his son is going to UT to do engineering, and he's going to intern with his dad's company. But then after that, like his philosophy is like go intern somewhere else. And the initial response is, "You don't want me to work here?" And it was like, "No, we want you to have more perspective. And then if you like that working here, then come back and work. Like it's great. We want you. We'd love for you to work here. Like you have a
Mhm.
job when you graduate." I think perspective is really important. And I think students can get it in college. Um, I think the challenge in mentoring is the fact that no one has time to mentor as much as they would like potentially, because there's
Yeah.
one person maybe that does the site civil work. There's one person that on the pre-con side, one person does steel. That's what they're familiar with, like the more complicated scopes. Um, they've got so many jobs coming in. It's just hard to hit pause, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
kind of teach and train. So I think that's a big piece of it. But the other part is this is why we say like the tool matters. Precon's like the last frontier in terms of how tech can really impact. Now AI is having an impact across all spaces. I get that, but um, Precon historically has been done in Excel or some kind of spreadsheet solution. Spreadsheets carry math, but they don't carry meaning. I'll give you the example back, like the school example again was show me your work. Okay, well, I just got to there's a definitive answer. And Precon, there's not always a definitive answer, right? It's like,
Right.
depends on the conversation. So you're trying to create shared understanding at the end of the day,
Right.
but there is definitive variables in a formula. For example, if I'm putting carpet tiles in a radiused room and my carpet tiles are square, guess what? I'm going to have waste. If my tool can't actually express that I have waste in this to help my younger estimators come up and say, "Oh yeah, you use square carpet tiles." I say, "Well, you have that 0.105 in there for 5% waste."
Mhm.
Then they don't understand it, right? If they don't understand the why would they go do the thing?
Right.
Why would they do pre-con if they don't
Yeah.
understand why and how it works?
Yeah. No, that's
Um,
exactly true.
so I think like, people are like, I'm not suggesting this is why I said the tool is not the silver bullet. It's not, but it can be supplemental to the people in the process. And that's where we started focusing on education too, because if we can help students, we can level them up earlier in school with the tool and the context. There's a much shorter on ramp to impact for them
Yeah.
than
Yeah,
at
exactly.
the table early in academia. And then you don't spend 3 to 5 years learning everything of that business. You actually have a very good starting point.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about education in a little bit, and I hope you can show maybe or talk a little bit about your little sample education plan that you ran by us a
Yeah.
few months back. So
Yeah.
One more thing on this. So we're losing people at retirement. So that's one end of the pipeline. We're not getting enough students or new people at the other end. So you got like this squeeze play happening.
Yeah.
And when it happens in a skilled role like this, you got this big compounding effects. You got guys that, they built their careers on Sage and OST, when those things were the cutting edge of technology, right? And now
Yep.
they're late in their 50s and 60s, and they're carrying what you talk about, like institutional knowledge that just lives in their head,
Yeah.
not in any one tool even per se. Um, when they walk out the door, and they will, a lot of that context goes with them.
Yep.
I've been in conversations, and you've had them as well, where you got GCs where someone says, "Well, so and so has been doing it this way for 25 years, and so that's
Yeah.
just how we do it." And I'm thinking, "Well, great. What happens when so and so isn't there anymore?" um, who
Correct.
knows why behind what they do? And that's what you keep talking about context in the tool.
Yeah, it's the knowledge gap. The big challenge in the industry, and this isn't just pre-con, this is really everything across every industry. This is the Proper Precon podcast. However, you could apply this to every industry in the world. It's
Yeah.
a knowledge gap. It's how do you take domain knowledge and feed it to younger folks so they can kind of backfill your shoes. Your ability to work yourself out of a job, which sounds crazy, is actually that's how you empower other people. We see so many estimators, like, heads of estimating, VP of estimating, like, they're still way in the weeds. They're still doing all the things because they can't work out of the weeds because there's that knowledge gap. And again, it goes back to time to mentor and all that kind of stuff. But um, we have to address the knowledge gap because you're right, it goes with them. And sometimes folks are like, well, that's my job security. I'm like, well, but you're going to retire in 5 to 7 years. Like,
Right.
let, let's not try and keep it locked up. There's another joke I was going to tell earlier about, like, um, an estimate an estimate stuck in a spreadsheet on a guy's computer um, is a hostage situation.
True. That's true. Oh, and that's
That,
because that's almost it's to your point, maybe job security for some of the people we're talking about. I
sure.
like to even think of it's a tech problem, right? That
Yeah.
the technology companies have, with this institutional knowledge, because if it has to live in somebody's head because it's not able to live in the tool, right? We think about it, if you're not able to actually uh, use your workflow in the tool. If the
Yep.
data's not there, then
Agreed.
when the estimator leaves, you don't just lose the person, you're actually losing your system as well.
And we have literally had calls where, hey, so and so is retiring in 2 months, and we have to somehow take his system and put it in another tool because no one else can do it in the tool we have. Um, and yeah, so I think we talk about people, process, technology. People are your value, process is how you deliver. Technology is literally the bridge that can make both better, given the opportunity.
Eh, what about this just came to me too, the supply side of estimators. You got schools waiting. I mean, they're graduating construction management students, whether it's engineering, construction management, whatever degree they're in that program. And there's hundreds of schools out there, thousands and thousands of students. I would think, in the programs. We met a bunch of them, with the competition, and we're certainly talking to several schools now where we're acting, communicating with these students. But where are they going? Why don't more of them make that move into estimating versus, I don't know, are they going into project management? What are they doing that they're not going into pre-con, say?
I just had a call yesterday with a school, and one of the students. Actually, I asked a general question. I said, "So who's interested in going into pre-construction?" There were two-ish hands that raised like this. They just did this. That was it. And then at the end of the of kind of the call there, there's a question around like, well, what would you say would incentivize a student to go into pre-construction? What would not incentivize them? I tried to kind of explain, like, well, we get general construction education. We try and like throw everything at you and say, hey, here's the kitchen sink. And then you go kind of get a more tailored learning experience at a general contractor.
Yeah.
Um, Based on their process, right? So I like I tried to set the stage for like, well, hey, pre-con, like if you do well at pre-con, it's great. It's great soft skills. It's actually not sitting behind a spreadsheet. It's talking to people. If you're a social person, it's really like, it's actually really fun. You get to help folks building clients, solve problems, get to a target value, understand their job with them, get aligned, and then you move forward and build the project. Like it's a ton of fun. Now you don't win every project, but it's a lot of fun to help people and just serve people. Hopefully that becomes revenue for the business. I didn't really have a great reason for what wouldn't incentivize them aside from trying to play the spreadsheet card. Like you think it's probably glorified accounting. You don't just sit behind a computer all day because you really don't. I mean, you do some, but it's not all the time, right? Um, and then I asked my follow-up question to this student was, um, what do you want to do when you ask what do you want to do? Is like, I just want to change the center console on my truck. And I'm like, well, there's that too. Maybe you don't want to be in pre-con, or I don't know what you want to do, but like you get such a mixed bag of like
Oh,
students want to do certain things. And I get like, we were in college at one point. But I do think that there's enough responsibility. There can be enough responsibility in college to kind of do more. And some students take it more seriously than others. But yeah, I think, um,
so they don't necessarily do, and this is not like, bashing the schools or anything like that,
yeah,
but it's not really a learning path for pre-construction or estimating. They get a lot of general knowledge on a lot of things, and then it's left to when we get to the, GCs or whomever we're working for to sort of fill where we're going to be. They may not know what pre-con actually entails, right, when they're there. And I would think that from a technology side, I don't know that we've helped the cause much as an industry for the last 30, 40 years. When you think about, for a long time, the dominant estimating software out there was really something like Sage. And
yep,
that hasn't been updated in 25 years, I don't think. I mean, it's,
yeah,
you know, um, but somebody looking at that today, it doesn't really make the job feel modern if they're using that in their classroom. They're thinking, what is this thing I'm using here? And that applies to a lot of softwares out there. You think of things like WinEst and others, you're clicking through interfaces that were designed in 2000. And, and I just don't feel that's going to attract someone that grew up with an iPhone.
I agree. And I I think like as a product of my construction education at Auburn, and my time in the industry, my time in tech, you're right. It's no knock on education. It's like you you know what you know at the time and you do what you do.
Right.
Technology, because and look, as far as technology and construction as a whole, like it's still like it's improved on the tech front and digitization, which is great, but it's been close to the bottom of the list if you look at all the industries across the globe, right?
Right.
Um, but it's improving. I think that tech has been leveraged as like, well, hey, we have technology. We're going to have a CIT class, which I loved that class. And it's good to learn the tools, but it loses the context of like, well, I have to take means and methods and project controls, and I have to take
Mm.
scheduling, and I have to take um, uh, construction law. I've got like all these and structures and all these things, right? But if the tool that you're using that carries the context, so that tool's not used to carry the context in those classes, then are you fully understanding the why behind it? You're doing this thing isolated over here to learn about it, and you're doing this thing isolated over here that's supposed to actually reinforce that learning. But
Yeah.
because they're not happening together, they actually it stifles the learning experience. And I think that there's a future path. I don't know if you want me to go into this right now, but like the future path of like, I mean, look at trade schools. You made the point about trade schools. You go to trade school, you hyper focus on becoming a plumber or electrician.
Yeah.
There's some value to that even in the university setting. I mean, I don't know what college will look like I mean, my kids are young right now, I don't, 10 years. But there's value to what trade schools do. You could apply some of that into a 4-year education where you like the first 2 years, you get a general education and enough exposure to the different paths. And then the last 2 years, you pick a pathway based on internships.
Yeah.
You get real world experience, you pick a path, and you graduate with a focus on a pathway. So that could be pre-con, could be BIM VDC, tech, could be project management, could be like just pick the path, right? And I think that would go a long ways in helping the industry. Well, help colleges have a pipeline of people coming out for specific roles, and the industry know what's coming in. So if we want to address the need for more labor, or like whether it's the office, the field, wherever, that's predictable,
Yeah.
right? And it creates a predictable model.
I wonder if things like this ABC competition that we were a part of, or Edify was a part of, you were very, very much a part of it. You got to see, firsthand what students maybe thought estimating was or is versus what it is and how they were going to be judged on it. What did that look like?
Yeah, I mean, initially, then every team had like 4 to 6 folks on the team, really. There were 30 some colleges, 30, 31, 35 colleges, something like that. I think going into it, and we had some office hours in January, but going into it, I don't know if there were any expectations, because I found out that some of these schools, like when you say, what is pre-construction? Like, that's if I was to technically define it, it's everything before construction starts. That'll actually include design as well, if you think about it
Yeah.
that way.
Yeah.
But as it relates to construction, what is pre-construction? I asked that question yesterday, actually, to this other school. The answer was pretty good, but it was still missing some components of what it entailed. And so I think that they kind of went into it with no expectations. And I'm assuming here, I'm going to imagine, like when they said, well, who's going to do the estimate? I'm not sure everyone just like raised their hands, like, I'll do the estimate, sign me up for that. But the before and after initially was like, they didn't know really what precon, like how involved precon was, and like setting a successful plan and foundation for the project that then the operations team has to take and execute. After they did this entire project, where they built the schedule, did quantity takeoff, plugged in the estimate, even used the unit mix and Edify, use use groups, all these different things, like they had a much better understanding of what was on the project. And again, it's because we're building it in this programmatic way. A handful
That's
of the
why I
students.
think that I'm sorry to
Oh
cut
yeah,
you
you're
off right
good.
there, but that was one of the things I was thinking. The tools that we build need to reflect the
Mhm.
pre-construction process.
Correct. They should reflect modern pre-construction workflows. The other challenge in this, or maybe like opportunity, is, as a guy that was in construction, left construction, went back to construction, owners change too. Owners want to see different KPIs. And if the tool can't understand the narrative between from this to this as things evolve, and you have to go into a spreadsheet and again change this stuff, it XREF galore. It breaks everything in a spreadsheet, right? So it's the benefit of having utility inside of a pre-con platform or software like Edify, for example, is like, if they say we want to measure by this thing now, great, put it in there as a unit, as a use or unit
Yeah,
spec, and it's part of the use group. You can measure by it, right?
exactly.
It's a tool that can help create shared understanding for the client, but then it's a two-way street. Also creates like a learning experience inside of Edify for those students to learn.
That's one of the first things I noticed about Edify right away. I mean, the first time I saw it, and I had my call with Dustin before coming here, I said, I can tell an estimator designed this software. And I got to think, if a student's first exposure to an estimating tool is to an estimating tool that mirrors this workflow that we've been talking about, that we will continue to talk about, the way the cost flows from, a concept to all through those milestones of SD and DD, they're going to get it faster. They're going to
Yep.
understand the process better. The on-ramp's going to be shorter. And when they graduate, they're going to be able to show up at a contractor's office. They may not really be starting from zero.
That's right.
All right. Well, that was a great segment. Quick note, Proper Precon is powered by Edify. They're our sponsor. Edify is a cloud construction software for estimators and general contractors who are tired of piecing together their workflows. You're doing it in Excel, maybe several different programs. You're hoping for the best. You're going to get a better experience. You're going to get faster. You're going to be more collaborative with this pre-construction tool. It's the only true cloud-based platform on the market. It was born and built in the cloud. You're going to be able to harness, real-time data. You're going to get integrated workflows. You're going to be able to streamline and collaborate with your team, integrate with other cloud solutions easily with Edify. So you guys can tell, a more compelling cost narrative it's going to hopefully guide your clients with more confidence through this process. So it's what Trey and we work with every day. But our show isn't about us. It's not about Edify. It's about the precon, or the problems precon teams are trying to solve every day. But if you're curious, you can check it out at edify.com. But for now, let's get back into it, Trey. Let's talk about, you know, what GCs can do right now. Let's be practical. I'm a VP, say, or you're a VP at a regional GC. That's probably more realistic in this out of the two of us. But they're not going to hire me as a as a VP of pre-construction. But I've got two senior estimators, right? They're going to retire in 5 years. I got one mid-level estimator that I'm trying to grow, or maybe a couple of juniors. What can I actually do to try to retain estimators and attract new ones? I want to just, maybe talk just a little bit more about this. Is there any ideas to actually get people more excited about this role?
Yeah, I don't know if you want me to pop up Edify in this case to give a visual, because I can, but I think uh, to get people more excited about it, as a GC, like if I'm the VP of Precon or director of Precon, whatever, then I want to invite my my senior's already part of this, but then invite the junior estimators into the process, um, to be part of the like creating the story and the narrative. Um, and almost like to a place of not just saying go do quantity takeoff and do this and then we'll plug the estimate, but like be part of the conversations and the meetings we have with the clients, right? So they all have a stake in the game and can feel the weight of what we're actually doing and get behind the mission and vision of like the GC I'm working for, right? So I think that's what would kind of get people more excited about it. Um, the more involvement they get, the more empowered they feel, and the more curiosity that kind of ensues from that too, because there's gonna be questions that are asked and maybe they don't know the answer. They can then ask the question just by being in the room. You don't know what to ask if you're not part of the conversation, right? So,
True.
uh,
That's what I was thinking. It almost gets back to mentorship, and you mentioned it just a bit ago about it becomes this time crunch that they face, but it has to be intentional. I think not really like this informal. We'll get to it when we get to it, because you can't put a junior estimator next to a senior and just sort of hope that they learn by osmosis. I mean, there has to be some sort of structured knowledge transfer. I mean, that means that the senior person is, documenting their reasoning, if you will. They're using a tool like Edify that tells the story better. And, it's not just their numbers, but that must be kind of hard to mandate, right? Um, when you've got a department like that that's already stretched thin. I mean, is there a plan B? I mean, could they get more PMs involved in the estimating process? Again, if the tool were better, maybe
yeah,
not doing takeoff really, but
yeah.
maybe to help validate scope, talking through, what was hard to build on a last similar job, so that knowledge starts moving in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, some companies where I was, we actually had PMs involved in pre-con as well. Certainly during the buyout phase, but even some before then, where we needed some input on a job that maybe they built previously. Um, so it's like, it's a team effort that does help. And it actually makes the whole, like the culture at the company feel that much more productive as well and just positive. So yeah, PMs can be part of that. I think to kind of create that team environment. Um, but even like again, if you can estimate faster, you from a business standpoint, you get more revenue per head. You can actually price more work at any given time. Because you have to be you have to be cautious, or yeah, just cautious of like context switching. If you pull a
Yeah,
PM off their jobs every day, that's going to stretch them thin as well. So
true.
it goes both ways.
Balance. What about compensation and even career path, which
Oh
is
yeah,
we talk about? Is the industry, are they paying estimators what they're worth? Even especially even at the entry level, say, if I'm a junior estimator, can I see a career path to senior estimator, maybe director of pre-construction or even VP? Or does it feel like maybe I'm in a dead end department versus going into project management, say?
yeah. It depends. Well, it probably doesn't. I don't know. I'll say this depends, but oftentimes you give the example from the client side to the GC. Hey, can you create a estimate for me or get me a number for this? And it's just, I think I'm not saying this is the assumption across the board, but it almost feels like a laissez-faire just go back to your office and just give me a spreadsheet, right? And it's not that simple. It's never that simple. Um, but then, um, from the pre-con side of things, though, like, so PMs are typically charged projects, and oftentimes pre-con is charged to overhead. So there's business pursuits and things like that where that becomes an overhead expense from the builder side partly because clients, like, you price a job for a client for the chance to get it. That's the pre-con piece. That I've rarely seen a pre-con contract. They don't
And
happen.
so is that part of the problem then that we have this shortage? It's almost self-inflicted wound. I think of overhead, I think, well, I want to cut overhead. Is there a balance that the GCs are saying
Yeah.
like, well, I'll risk not spending this $200,000, say, by the time I got, my burden and everything and benefits for an estimator,
Yeah.
because I may or may not get some work. I got to see a pretty big ROI to justify that cost. Is that a self-inflicted wound then, partially, that I'm hearing?
I think it can partially be that because when it is coming from overhead, the goal every year is also always to reduce your overhead. And companies can get creative in how they do that. Uh, I want to be cautious though, because if I'm coming out of school, I'm also not going to a company expecting to make $200,000 a year.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Like, if I'm a seriously junior estimator, like, if I had a great education and really know what I'm talking about and negotiated my rate or something like that because of my education, and maybe I've interned there, whatever else, then you have potential to make more, but based on the value you bring, not based off perceived value that you're going to bring in 5 years, right? So I was really cautious on that. That's a part of it, but yes, overhead. You're always reducing overhead. You're trying to, but pre-con, since it happens before the job, if you think of it that way, there's no job you're charging it to. Not saying that doesn't ever happen if there's a pre-con contract, things like that, but there's what are you charging it to? So it's like as you say, you would say, like, cost of doing business, um, which makes it that much more challenging to. I mean, you got so much work coming in, you can't mentor people quickly, fast enough. You got a shortage. Like, how do you level those people up so they can work into those higher earning tiers?
Yeah. I'm not sure what I want to I want to close this section on education, but there's a two-part uh, sort of question, and I'm toying which way to go first. Maybe I'll just run them. I'll run it by you, and you could pick which angle we want to go first. So, um, I'm thinking if you could walk into a construction management program, and I know you've had these conversations. What are what's one thing you would change about it, right? About how they are either teaching estimating or the curriculum that's there. And I mentioned earlier your education sort of plan idea that you put together for schools. I mean, realistically, if they would embrace it. But
Yeah.
part two is we're getting some great momentum in the education space at Edify over the last few months. And we've got to, deploy like LSU, Georgia Tech, University of Tennessee, I believe Kent State. There's several, other smaller schools. Not to mention the large amount of conversations you and I are both having with, a dozen or more universities that want to get involved with Edify. So talk about that initiative too. Where do you see that heading and the long-term benefits of Edify getting deployed in these schools?
What kind of stemmed this was when we met with Georgia Tech last year, and met with Auburn and some different schools. And then we jumped into the student competition. And then there was lots of interest in using Edify in the curriculum. And I just started thinking through, like, we're trying to get senior estimators, heads of precon, to get their domain knowledge in a tool so it can be distilled to, or like it can be transferred to more junior estimators once they retire. Um, and my initial thought was, uh, e every GC, so when you come out of school, you work for a GC, it takes quite a bit of time just to onboard and ramp and learn the things. You learn a lot just with hands-on experience, which is great. You do internships in college too. I did some of those. Um, but there's a pretty steep learning curve even after school to actually get to a place of making an impact. I mean, you can do what you can, but I'm saying like a more holistic impact to the business can be a little more challenging. And so the desire here behind the like kind of thinking what this new curriculum could look like is I took an existing curriculum, the one I came from actually, and I kind of reshaped it in a way I mentioned earlier where CIT classes, technology classes exist separately from the context class, the classes that's where, you learn this here, but then you have this other thing here that you actually, you have to take this understanding and then get it in the tool. They don't typically exist together. And so the idea here behind the curriculum is to create these like field leadership, pre-construction estimating, project management operations, MVDC, and just tech paths.
Yeah.
So it's still 4 years, but we can generalize some of the first 2 years and then have these like the first 2 years and then have 2 years of specialization. And really the opportunity is this role-based specialization like we talked about. The tech and just the fluency in general. You mentioned like, Sage, other tools we built in the 2000s, like even in the 1990s.
1990.
Yeah. So, like those tools that are older, there's no there won't be any tech fluency in those because to your point, students on iPhones and their laptops and stuff and using AI, they don't speak the same language. They don't operate the same way. UI UX is so different. And so there's a tech fluency that we can create out of this. And we can also quantify the graduates that are coming out of the schools each year. The other part of this, which I think is awesome, is the chance to kind of create a micro realistic environment of how it would work in the real world. And so like some of these schools, like if you have construction, they often have design. Well, designers work with builders. Designers create the drawings, maybe make a model. They can share that with the builders. I did this actually for my thesis. We got some drawings, had a model, made the model, did all the takeoff, all the stuff. But you can simulate these real world industry things that happen in preparation without an internship, just in preparation for when you go into the industry. So I think there's so much like potential here to kind of capitalize on the opportunity there. But, the structure I'm looking at is more generalist and then picking a pathway. And then there's a thesis simulation at the end of it, or some schools call it a capstone project. But look, that capstone project should just be, I'll scroll on here. I have them kind of laid out a little bit after you pick a pathway. So here's a thesis example. So a mock RFP coordination OAC meeting, right? If I'm focused on pre-con, put me in a room and my professor's a building owner and there's other folks from the industry, say from Hoare Construction, Robinson Morton, Brassfield, Swinnerton, whoever, right?
Yeah.
They participate in this and they're also on this committee and they present their budget to the client and focus on how they're actually option engineering that and helping them work towards a target value through things like not just a VE list. It could be VE, but more importantly, you could say, well, we did these units. And the students say, well, do you get enough revenue? Do you get more revenue for these other units? That's a valid question. And if the answer is yes, they can re-option engineer it right there in front of them. That's super impactful and a game changer for this industry.
Yeah.
It helps them understand how their pro forma works, what their cost per key is, cost per parking spot, all that stuff, right? So we can again simulate this stuff. Like it all culminates at the end in this thesis that is representative of how it works in the industry. And I know there's already, it kind of already happens a little bit. Like this exists in the capstone projects and thesis, you present your stuff. I'm just saying, make it a little more real world and apply the pathway to it. And then all of a sudden you have someone who's much more prepared to go into pre-con or go into project management or go into BIM and VDC. Because Swiss Army knives are great. They do it all. But the industry's not asking for Swiss Army knives. They're asking for a pre-con person or a project manager, right?
Yeah.
So that's the idea as a whole. And this is really like, again, came out of student competition, other conversations with professors. This just plants seeds for us to start like getting students up to speed faster and how pre-con works for us at Ediphi at least, and how we're trying to kind of guide the industry. But also there's other seats here around like other parts, like how GCs look at their departments. Well, how does academia set the table for those as well? So I'm not trying to be biased here and only pick one. I did have multiple options in this article because they're all important. But yeah, that's the idea. But the goal is to like merge the tech in with the context and like, so it's not like fully detailed, but that's the idea. That's
Yeah.
pretty much in a nutshell.
Harder to make change probably at the program level, because that's some conversations with school leadership, deans, heads of departments, and things of that nature to really get uh,
Correct.
these learning paths adopted. Although a great initiative, I think it's a conversation worth having. I mean, for sure. One thing we can have a little more control over is the technology, though,
Yeah.
and getting Edify into these schools, which I mentioned. There's several that are adopting it as we speak now, and a dozen or more that are, I believe, will start adopting it later this year as we get into summer classes and they have time to
Yep.
get some enablement through the software. So I'd like to segue over, if we can, into tool talk, right? So we have these conversations about tech adoption problem. We've been talking about a lot of it during this episode, at the university level and how we make the change there. And I want to look at it through the lens of what, we're building here at Edify, and how workflows, and in particularly how workflows are structured, having a tool that mirrors the process in a way that's logical. Even if you've maybe been doing the work, in pre-construction outside of a software program for 10 or 20 years, the tool and the workflow should be the same thing, right? So show us one way that Edify is tackling that today. Give us a little demonstration of the software.
Yeah. So I'm going to click into one of these projects. I'll go into the apartment high rise and I'll expand, open up my left nav bar here. I'll dismiss this. We just released this cost trend line. This is one way we're doing it is, again, we said precon's an art. It's a science and an art, but we're working our estimates toward a target value over here. Our target value gets set at each milestone based off of the previous milestone of where we want to be. Or it could be consistent, totally up to how you set the milestones up, but kind of tracking this narrative. If I was looking at this, and I'll go back to the learning piece, if I'm looking at this in just a file folder structure, and I had no clue what estimate was what, I couldn't tell you how we're tracking against that number. And this is just servicing it inside of the project and the estimates driving it. So regardless of contract type, every job's target value, you have to get to some number. And so we actually give a very easy to follow story and narrative here where you can see that cost trend line, your target value against your grand total from the estimate. You can actually adjust these. If I pick my previous estimate, these numbers adjust. You can also see your schedule of values down here, how you're trending based off of different sort fields. So if it's master formats, your CSI, or even your bid package, or other sort fields you add as well. And you can see cost, like total dollar amount or cost per square foot. And then below that, we actually have that information broken out by those use groups. So use groups are like asset classes. So on mixed use, which is everything in downtown Nashville right now for the most part, below grade parking, retail, core and shell, and apartments on top. You don't just present a number to that client and say, hey, here's your cost per square foot. No, they have to understand what their cost per square foot is of each individual use of the building and the cost per, in this case, unit, or cost per parking spot, because those are the use groups that they defined. Like putting this in context inside of Edify tells a really impactful story. The other piece of this too, though, if I click into the estimates, is I'll go into our GMP set, 75% CDs. Inside the estimate, notice that you can, like, I'm just going to scroll down here a little bit. We'll get to finished carpentry. I can right click on any of these lines and I can see historical pricing. So as a junior estimator, if I don't understand how to price something in Edify once it's in the estimate, or if I just add it to the estimate, I can see any other time it's been priced in my region, or I can just remove that region filter and see across my entire company. So I have Las Vegas in here as well, and Boston. So you can see like cost history as it relates to that specific line item in that scope without having to run a separate report and try and find the information. So we're surfacing contextual information that helps you learn as you build the estimate. And even if you're more senior, like if you're questioning what's my rate on this one, what did I use on the last one, right click on the line and look at your cost right here. We're going to be doing more with this around analytics and dashboards and things like that. We're going to get into AI. We have some component to that now in beta, but Like these are the things that need to exist in a pre-con platform so that A, the client understands, and B, again, when you bring on new folks to the GC, into the GC company, right? They have context on what to pick up on, and if they have questions, they know where to go. I think this is really hard to set a foundation for, but Edify does it really well as a technology.
Well, I saw context, right? The tool carries the why, not just the what. So you mentioned an estimator builds something in Edify. Sound like to me that the idea is that a different estimator, even a junior, could jump in and understand what decisions were made and potentially why they made them. And to me, that's different than inheriting a spreadsheet where it can be difficult to track back, the formulas or a number that was hard keyed in, right? And from a technology perspective, I think that's actually a hard thing to build. Calculation tools, granted, math aside, I'm not a math guy, but calculation tools are easy. It's hard to build a tool that carries some reasoning with it. I think it's like a design problem that historically we have not been good at in pre-construction, right? We've done a great job. I think of it from the top. You've got, design tools, AutoCAD, things of that nature, done excellent work and really evolved over time, done a great job. You've got takeoff tools. I would say, let's say that design's done excellent. Takeoff has done really good compared to, we used to do it and scratch it out on a notepad and write it down after we took it off with a scale. Now we got really good cloud tools that could do on-screen takeoff, and they can even just do the takeoff for you, right? So done a great job on there. We've done a fair to good job on estimating, and I would put the caveat there on self-perform tools. Trade tools have done really well in the MEP space of self-perform work. Even tools like Sage, WinEst, ProEst, historically have done a pretty good job at doing estimates for even general contractors, but only on the stuff they're self-performing. Maybe I'm doing concrete or framing, right? So we've done good. We haven't done a great job in designing these tools, right, that have this reasoning that Edify is solving. Because when we've talked about this whole episode, when a senior retires, if the tool doesn't have context, the organization, they lose the estimator and the context behind it. So I'll leave it with that. If you want to see a little bit more of what Edify can do, you can check us out. Again, edify.com, EDIPHI. Trey, last word on the tech?
If you're looking to connect a cost story from beginning to end, Edify will do that. We will make it happen. So if you're struggling getting metrics and outputs, because you take trade partner numbers and maybe you're not building the estimate all the time, we can help you get over those hurdles. So yeah, Edify's great.
Excellent.
Yep, no complaints.
All right. You know what time it is, Trey? It is time for the lightning round, the fast five, if you will. I got 5 questions.
Forgot
I need
about this.
answers. Are you ready for this
Yeah.
week's questions?
Yeah.
All right, here we go. Question number 1. One thing that construction management programs should be teaching estimators, but they're not.
Pre-construction.
All right. Question 2. What's the best quality a great estimator has that has absolutely nothing to do with math?
Man, social skills.
Question 3. The estimator shortage. If you had to point a finger at one culprit, you got to pick one. Is it GCs, schools and education, or the industry as a whole?
Industry as a whole.
That's fair. Question 4. Would you rather have one veteran estimator with 25 years experience or 3 junior estimators with 2 years each?
Is it depends an option?
It could be, sure.
It depends.
All right, and the last one. Finish this sentence. The pre-con team that figures out blank will have a massive advantage in the next 5 years.
Pre-con team that figures out their clients' needs.
We've talked a lot today. Just a few thoughts from our conversation. Estimator shortage. It seems like it's a complex thing that we may not ever figure out. It's not just a hiring problem, for sure. It's not just an education problem. It's not just a a mentorship problem. There's a lot that maybe is going on here. It's not, solved by posting a job. I think at the root of what we really need to capture, if we can't get more people, is certainly a better way to have a knowledge transfer um, from the current group that's there that is, facing retirement in 5 to 10 years to the next generation that's coming through. Perhaps it's a perception problem. The younger students don't know exactly what it is and what it entails, and so they're not prepping for that path along the way. But I'm not sure that the industry as a whole has built a great job at evangelizing what that being an estimator is a career worth building. And
Right.
I think, the consequences of that are showing up now. It's something that compounds over time. And I feel like it's probably going to get louder. I'm not sure tech can solve all of this. Like you say, tech's not the magic bullet
Yeah.
in this, but it's not completely unsolvable either. I think, you apply some of those things you talked about, take time to mentor the younger generation, find a way to grab that knowledge transfer, use a tool that actually is built for the pre-construction process, things of that nature, things like we're doing, better partnerships with universities. I think those are maybe the real levers that, companies can try to pull if they want to have a significant advantage in with their pre-con teams over the next 5, 10, 15 years. I mean, if I were leading pre-con personally, I'd be having conversations with junior estimators regularly about things that maybe aren't tied to a deliverable. I'd be asking them, what are they confused about? What do they wish they understood better? You talked about it last week, albeit in a bit of a different context, but we have to get better in this industry at having one-on-one conversations. And I think you said, if we can't do it one-on-one, it's going to be hard to walk into a room of 50 people and have that conversation.
Yep.
Right. So it has to start with us, has to start at the GCs. We have to start having more of these one-on-ones, not just in a formal, program, just I think better paying attention. And so with that, I'll give you the last word, close out the show. What do you want someone who's listening this week to take away from it?
Yeah, I think ultimately the goal of what we're trying to accomplish here is objective conversation, just kind of state what we're seeing, and then if any of this resonates, the ultimate aim is progress over perfection. We're not going to perfect this overnight. We're not going to perfect it at all in this lifetime, and that's okay. But we do want to focus on progress.
All right. Well, that's it. That's the whole thing right there, guys. Thanks for tuning in to Proper Precon. Please remember to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, share it with the world. It's free. It really does help us out. We're going to be back next Friday with a new episode. And remember, as always, Proper Precon is powered by Ediphi. If you want to see what it looks like when your estimating tools actually can grow with your team, check out edify.com, and we'll see you next week.
Proper Precon.